Before we get started, I just want to say that this video is mainly just to show how well optimized Linux is, not for you to go out and buy 10 to 12-year-old hardware. I was really surprised on how well the 390 actually did perform on Linux, because a lot of these games that I did try in Windows did not boot. I could not get most of them to even run. I even tried the Mesa drivers, or I think they're also referred to RID drivers or something along those lines. Those also didn't work for Marvel Rivals or Monster Hunter, but on Linux, they work just fine. And spoiler alert, just to give you a quick heads up, most of the games I tested this on, the system RAM did not exceed 8 gigabytes. The version of Linux I will be using is going to be Linux Mint. I did try CachyOS, but I ran into some problems, and I'll leave that closer to the end of the video.
Stellar Blade on the very high preset. Got an average of 42 FPS with a 1% low of 17. When I bumped it down to medium, I got on average 53 with a 1% low of 28. With the first Berserker on max preset, I got on average 44 FPS with a 1% low of 20. When I bumped it down to medium, I got 59 FPS with a 1% low of 31. Cyberpunk 2077 was one of the more confusing ones for me at the beginning, and so it's probably going to look that way for the charts. To give a basic breakdown, the biggest issue I ran into this took me a bit for me to figure it out, but the game was basically getting bottlenecked by the CPU. Granted, this is like a 12-year-old CPU. On average, I got 42 FPS with a 1% low of 20. But I also did some tests, got into some firefights, got 5 stars, just to see how bad it could get. And I got on average 34 with a 1% low of 18. And keep in mind there's no upscaling yet. When I decided to turn on FSR with the balanced preset, on average I got 58 with a 1% low of 34. And I also did some tests with some firefights. Cranked up the stars a bit, and I got an average of 38 with a 1% low of 25. But this is the worst case scenario. I put myself in areas where it was the worst for the game, where it says worst case. Monster Hunter Wilds. This is only just the demo benchmark that I did it on. I got on average around 30 FPS for the benchmark, which I think that's not too bad considering how old this gear actually is. This is not a new PC, so the fact that a 10-year-old PC can even run an unoptimized game like this is pretty impressive. At least I think. Tainted Grail, The Fall of Avalon. On average, at 1080p with the low preset, got 68 with a 1% low of 29. Marvel Rivals at 1080p on FSR 3 on ultra performance mode got on average 70 FPS with a 1% low of 33. Wuthering Waves on with FSR on and frame generation off. That's not even a setting for this game. On quality preset, I got on average 58 with a 1% low of 22. Just to note on this one, I did have some issues in the city similar to Cyberpunk, so you may want to bump it down to balanced mode if you run into issues. SplitGate 2 with dynamic resolution on the low preset got on average 102 FPS with a 1% low of 45. This game ran really smooth. Warframe at 1080p with the high preset got on average 52 FPS with a 1% low of 33. When I bumped down the settings to low, I got 110 FPS with a 1% low of 63. Just important note for this game is I did get one crash. Predecessor at 1080p on the low preset on average got 78 FPS with a 1% low of 37.
Okay, so I did run into some problems with the R9 390. The biggest one is a lot of DX12 games, ones that have you compile the shaders. This card and some of the older GCN cards that are older than this one, or the lower tiers of the 300 series, have issues with this as well. So this is not just isolated to this card. So that might be something you want to keep in mind. I noticed that the problem typically goes away once you've played one match and then I close the game, because what it's trying to do is it's trying to pre-save the effects from my understanding. And once it's saved the effects, that issue typically goes away. One other issue I did run into, well, there's a couple of other ones, but the next big one is I did crash from Marvel Rivals one time. It was one time, and that was not too bad considering I did it when I was playing for about an hour.
I did notice in some games the temperature did get up to 94°C on average, and this is going to be an issue if you were to use a GPU like this long term. I believe it's probably got something to do that the thermal paste hasn't been changed for close to probably 10 years. So I could probably get that better. But so for an easy fix for me to get it to work was I used Corectrl, which is a tool you can use which is very similar to Afterburner. You get basic functionality. I cranked the fan speed up to 100% and I lowered the wattage to I believe 140, somewhere around there.
All right, so some of the issues I ran into with CachyOS was really bad stuttering. I'll leave some of that as footage to go over this, but it was very bad. At some points, completely unplayable. Now, this is an older card, so it might be a driver. It might just be because that these are the cutting edge drivers that just it's not working properly. They're not stable. It could be a lot of different things. So I tried the latest kernel, and I also tried, I think, one of the 15.8 I think was the other one I tried, and I kept getting stuttering. It just would not run properly at all. Alright, final thoughts. I was actually very impressed on how well Linux actually runs, considering the fact that most games didn't exceed 8 gigabytes of system memory, and that's including the OS and everything else. Only exceptions was Monster Hunter Wilds, which I believe was around about 10. When I was also compiling the shaders for Marvel Rivals, it was also around 10. But once I closed the game and reopened it, it was sitting around 8 gigabytes, which was also not too bad. Warframe also exceeded it, but that was kind of bouncing around as well, which this might be a really good option if you don't have a lot of money to start off with a lot of RAM to begin with. You could always build up as you go. One thing I did really notice was the FX CPU, the 8370. You can kind of see the cracks, especially in Cyberpunk. That was, depending on the area, it wasn't consistent. That was the big issue that I ran into. Certain areas of the city, it was really bad, and then in other areas, not too bad. Now, if you decided to lock the FPS to 30, you could probably get an okay experience, but I know a lot of people want 60. But outside of that, the 390 held up pretty well as well, considering its age. Well, I mean, also the CPU did pretty well considering its age. They're both over 10 years old. I think the CPU is around 12. Not quite sure off the top of my head. But I think you can also still do a lot better than this, though. Much better bang for the buck. You could easily get a RX, doesn't say it on here, but this is the 480. Or you could probably get a 470 to close to around the same price as the 390, which it has better DX12 support. And also you could get, which I will have a video coming up on this too, is the 570 as well as the 580, which I got this open box. If you like this video, give it a thumbs up. If you dislike the video, give it a thumbs down. If you'd like to see more videos like this, consider subscribing. Thank you, and have a great day.